One disappointing outcome of the 2013 campaign was that despite these efforts, Informal once again polled third in Greenway, behind Labor and Liberal on 9.98%, a very marginal improvement from 2010. We specifically asked our scrutineers to note the types of informal votes at their booths on the night. Unlike some elections, where most informal votes are blank or decorated with expletives, it was a near uniform pattern. The piles of single ticks, crosses or ones in the box against my name vastly outnumbered all others. Few things frustrated me more on election day than the voter who came out of the polling booth, gave me a thumbs up and said, "Don't worry, Michelle, you'll be fine. I ticked your name twice." There's also been a degree of commentary about how Labor borrowed US-style campaigning in what's often called neighbourhood volunteer models, basically involving a combination of reaching out to community groups beyond party members and building on the modern relationship campaigning I referred to earlier. The reality is this: Labor was forced to adopt these Obama-esque tactics because we didn't have the money to do anything but. In the end, though, it was a blessing. It worked, but it highlighted a great tragedy. Back in the days when Labor was riding high in the opinion polls, cast your minds back, and the entire country was wall-to-wall Labor governments in 2007, we didn't use these tactics. Instead, we burned money on expensive and ineffective mass mail-outs. We ignored branch member and grassroots community support. We didn't reach out to others in the form of community organising. In fact, I often think that if we campaigned like we do now during the ETS debate in 2008-09, with call centres and boots on the ground discussing the issue, arming our supporters with the facts and engaging with people, we actually would have won that debate and the vote in the Parliament back in 2009. And wouldn't the political landscape be totally different now? The importance of the local or grassroots campaign in Greenway and other Western Sydney seats for Labor cannot be emphasised enough. In fact, the campaign in Greenway was almost an entirely local campaign. Throughout the recent parliamentary term, it was obvious the government struggled to get its message across to the wider community. It became clear during the campaign that the majority of people had switched off, although I did notice a brief flicker of re-engagement immediately following the final leadership change. Despite the fact that more than 500 pieces of legislation were passed in a hung parliament, including landmark and visionary achievements such as education reform, the National Disability Insurance Scheme and putting a price on pollution, this was buried by infighting and damaging leaks. Compare this with the discipline and unity showed by the coalition in opposition and during its campaign, and it's no wonder we performed badly in the opinion polls. And then in the campaign proper, the message from the government seemed to focus purely on personality and not enough on our achievements in government or our plans for the future. In the final week of the campaign, the national campaign finally switched to a policy focus. We saw the coalition put under pressure, but it was too little too late. And as I saw it, the national campaign was struggling, and therefore the ground campaign needed to be executed perfectly. We needed to cut through the negativity and vitriol that had dominated this term of the Parliament and reach out to people at a local level whilst developing my own personal profile. One of the things that the ALP does different to the Liberal Party, from my observation, is campaign like this at a grassroots local level. From my observations, the Liberal Party usually runs very similar cookie-cutter style campaigns in every seat, while the ALP develops local brands and messages. We had to take our achievements in government and explain them at a local level. Of course, there are some notable exceptions to this cookie-cutter approach I mentioned, and some of the best examples of people developing a local profile distinct from their party's profile have in fact been Liberal MPs. I mentioned Malcolm Turnbull in Wentworth, Jackie Kelly in Lindsay, and Dana Vale in Hughes. So on the whole, our campaign was based on reaching out to voters who didn't like Labor, felt there needed to be a change, but personally didn't mind me at a local level.